Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, Mini Ninjas here. Welcome back to the second part of the Final Fight 2 run. Part of the reason this video got split is just because it turns out the general gameplay ran a little longer than I thought, with the overall timing being around an hour 20 minutes, to be honest. I forgot how much longer this title was compared to the first one. Or the first port that's missing a title there. And we're going through a bonus game, which unfortunately, although at this point I've gotten the hang of the barrel thing again, or this particular bonus stage, I forgot that if you punch it while they're flaming, you'll get knocked back. I got knocked back one too many times, and I don't have enough time to finish. Yeah, that probably was the last few barrels right there on the screen, and those last three, including that one that's just edged on there. Alright, at this point we are now moved on to Italy, which off the top of my head we are now actually in the second last stage of the game, which will be the reintroduction of the missing boss from the first title as the boss of this round. Which is inclusion here kind of looks a bit along the lines of what would be kind of a makeup boss, considering that they left out his entire stage in the first game. Of course, I'm talking about Rolento here. And in this case, he appears with a slightly different color scheme, but for the most part, the boss fight will honestly be mostly the same, although I'd say it's actually slightly more... Well, actually, no, never mind. Compared to the arcade port, no, it's not more difficult, but still a little more difficult than everything you've faced up to this point. As for the stage itself, the main obstacle will just be the sheer number of enemies they're going to be throwing your way to get to him, or to get to the boss fight itself, along with the fact you have a bit of a issue being able to see things at the very start there because the foreground layer blocking off part of the view. Once you get past that though, everything starts getting a little more smooth sailing again. Just to go over one or two details I might have left out in the first video. You probably have noticed, on top of the fact that I try to generally keep enemies off screen because of the aforementioned reason that if they're not visible on the screen in any way, they can't seem to attack you properly while you can hit them just fine. You'll also probably notice I've done quite a few times in this game, whenever I'm doing a jump attack, it would be a neutral jump kick followed by the down attack version of it. Part of the reason why, other than the fact that it just looks a little visually amusing, is realistically, if you whiff with your first jump attack, and it will leave you open to kind of a counter attack of any sort there, if you cancel into your down attack version, you can actually basically turn into or cancel into that second attack there, and if you were just shy of your hitbox the first time around, that may give you just the extra distance you need in order to actually make your attack work and not get hit. So, suffice to say, it's just kind of a fail-safe measure or a plan B if you missed your first time around. It's also actually something that carried over from the first game, which, admittedly, I only realized that not too long ago, I'd have to admit, because I honestly, until that little bit ago, had never tried it before in the first game. I didn't notice it right now, or at least I didn't really bother to pay much attention. Last check, doesn't Elliot have two L's in it at the near the start there? Another thing about it, you have an enemy that has that's named Scott in this game, but Scott is spelled like Scott. Pretty much there's an SCH at the beginning there. Is that a common thing somewhere? I don't know. It's either they kind of just wanted to do kind of a strange anglicized version of names, or they just wanted to, or at least they didn't proofread a lot, because let's be honest, how many times in other games have you had characters that are established characters that get weird naming or weird renames or typos in the name? Because Roland, for example, Rolento really, appears as Roland on quite a few titles, including this one off the top of my head. I really hate these enemies. They're actually... It looks fine here, because I'm keeping everything a little more managed, but they're actually a pain in the butt to fight as Haggar just because they're really that much faster than Haggar. And assuming if you aren't already in the air to meet them with a drop kick, or the down attack version, which is pretty much a body splash, I can't think of a good way to counter the jump attack off the top of my head. I probably got more damage from cheap hits like that than I did through just about anything else in the course of this run, I think. Alright, this bit, I think this should be the last couple of enemies in this particular section. Not that you really get to see many of them at this point, they're being all kept off screen. It makes it more manageable that way. Okay, part of that I must have been able to just creep on screen long enough in order to make that dashing attack work. And now you got a couple of them and they're charged up. Yeah, and unfortunately, even I think if you manage to hit them down, I don't think they lose their charge. Or at least I've never actually, or at least I don't recall ever having seen that before during my playthroughs of this game. Which is really unfortunate, because I would really like them to drop the charge a lot of the time. It would make things so much easier. The reason you see me jump kicking off screen is I think the hitbox for the jump kick is actually a little longer than your standard punch in this case, which really helps if you have some enemies that can kind of dash in on you if they appear even a slice bit, like Elex or Andores. And of course, if you have enemies that tend to do a lot of blocking, like any enemies in the Atlas set, that way you have just a little extra distance in order to try to hit them and do a little more substantial damage without them wandering too close and possibly getting real counterattack in. Why, this looks familiar. Elevator-based violence. While this is a callback to the industry stage from the first Final Fight, the one that got cut on all the Super Nintendo ports, no, this is not the boss fight with Roleno that's going to be going on here. Mind you, yeah, this is a really similar setup, though. Just like in the original game, you had everyone dropping off from the side. The game would effectively gift you with a few items and a weapon or two that would be lying on the ground for use whenever you wanted. And yeah, I killed everyone before I remembered to get the weapon, or the health in this case. And now we have the proper boss fight. Second last boss of the game, Rolando in what appears here as green version of his normal uniform, although if you look in the original Japanese art, it actually has a bit of a camouflage pattern. This is actually, I'd say, a little bit of a harder fight for Haggar, especially as the fight goes on and he starts getting faster. Just because he really gets that much faster than Haggar, and unless you are able to predict things, or really know exactly when he's about to jump and pull off a jump kick just in time to counter it, it really gets harder to get him as the fight goes on here. When he's down to like his last health bar, and not only is he moving incredibly fast, he starts chucking grenades all over the place, then things start getting really nasty. You actually have to try to make sure you're able to grab him in order to pull off a throw and make sure you have enough invincibility to avoid any of the grenades that are just randomly rolling on the ground everywhere. For the most part, I'd say this boss fight would be easier for any of the other two characters. In Maki's case, she moves faster than the rest of the cast off the top of my head, so she'd have a much easier time. And Carlos is pretty much average speed, so he'll be doing alright too. But if you're able to keep close enough and make sure to get Rolando just after his invincibility after getting up wears off, you can still take care of him with Haggar fairly easy. I'm honestly just making this look harder than it is just because I'm out of practice. I'm gonna be honest here. I'm trying to remember if they used this general color scheme in any of the Alpha games, since I can't recall if they either went out at around the same time or one of the Alpha games, or Alpha 2 actually came out a bit after that. But I really can't think of a bright or kind of a lime green uniform that came up at any point. And also, yeah, because of color limitations, and here come the grenades. Because of the color limitations, that's why the grenades are the same color as Roleno's hat for the most part. Because they normally don't appear that shade in any other case. At this point in the fight, you really want to keep close to Roleno, especially as Haggar, that way you can grab him and use the invincibility from any of your grab attacks to avoid any grenades that are going along the ground here. The only sad part about his inclusion here is after you beat him, Rolando does not chuck grenades all over the place, effectively blowing up everything around him, including himself. And the return of Story. Which sounds out of character. Where my master awaits you? Yeah, this is a lot more talking that really should go on here. But hey, whatever. Let's be honest, you're not playing the beat-em-ups here for the plot exactly, as we go back to Japan where everything hypothetically started for the last stage, which is a bit more of an endurance thing just because this stage actually goes on for quite a bit of time. And basically also the exam stage of the game, because you're going to be seeing a bit of everything you've come across at this point, on top of just every enemy possible, it feels like. Unfortunately, because of the last fight, I played really badly, so I'm really hurting for lives right now. In this kind of situation, you'd really want to have a second player. If you were handy, you'd be doing still okay at this point. Or what you're gonna have to do, what I'm gonna try to do here, and play conservatively enough so I can make it so that I'll be able to get at least one extra life back or so, hopefully by the course of this round, through point acquisition. Just because you get back lives at every 200,000, I think, off the top of my head. I think that's the default value anyway. And I'll really be needing that, actually. I'm fairly close to the next one, but I'm still enough out that it's problematic. Unfortunately, just because the sheer amount of enemies they want to throw at you in this case, I'd say this is the most problematic stage for regular enemies, just because there'll be some combinations that will come up that will be really large pain in the ass. You're gonna, for example, see a lot of Andoras come in this case. It's considering the Andora family is not really that big. You have regular Andora, you got Andora Jr., which I believe is the one that they refer to as Hugo in all of the later Street Fighter titles. You got Father Andora, Grandfather Andora, and I believe Uncle Andora. So you got 5 guys that keep showing up. And unfortunately in this game, or in this last round in particular, they really like pairing up any of the Andora family with Elix. So you're kind of being distracted at all sides. And as I mentioned in the first video of this set, if you get hit by a regular attack and then get comboed by an elixir that's charged up, you're basically looking at half your life bar gone, if not more. And that really hurts. All the more reason that whenever an elixir shows up, you would probably see me try to kill it first, the moment I realize it's there, especially before it gets a chance to charge up. Looking at this general place, it seems like a place that Sodom, aka Katana, would like to hang out at. It seems like it's sort of digging. It's sort of dive, really. Of course, since this is technically the last stage, that begs the question, what exactly the deal is behind the now current leader of Mad Gear, who apparently has a nice international setup at this point, where the original Mad Gear seemed really more of a local thing. Which also begs the question of, aside from an obvious revenge angle, why Haggar's really involved himself in this sort of thing, or why most people have got involved there. Because if it's now more of an international thing, why bother to take vengeance against just something in kind of a smaller North American city thing, when at this point you've clearly grown beyond that? And it's like, yeah, if we leave them over there, they're probably not going to do anything to us, so we can just kind of leave them alone and continue with our own business uninterrupted. But no, we have to take revenge for some reason. And apparently that spurs the wrath of this guy. He's like, yeah, I'm mayor of a major metropolitan city, but yeah, I'm gonna do a little globetrotting just to beat people up. But once again, I remind myself this is a beat 'em up, so you don't want to think about this stuff too much. And that hurt. And this hurts more. And I am not looking good for health on. Oh crap. Yeah, I should mention, if you're doing a backwards jump, at least you either have a lot of trouble getting an attack to come out, or attacks will not come out if you're jumping backwards. So that was effectively throwing away the last bit of the life, which could have been stretched out a lot more. And between a hit and that ellipse dash attack, I just lost a good bit of health on what is my last life right now. And I am not looking very good there, ladies and gentlemen. And I could really use an extra life right around now. I should be close enough with points to be in order to get one, but I need more than what I got right now. So we have to play really conservatively at the moment. In this case, I'd have an easier time hitting the Atlas here if he's on screen. And probably that was a weird turn. Alright, I probably can survive 1 or 2 hits tops. Can I have an extra life here? Anytime now, base points gods. Can use an extra life here. No, not an Andore, and extra life. And at least in this game, they're a little more generous to the fact that the Andore's dash attack is a lot more predictable, or just seems to move a lot slower. Oh. And we're down. Oh well. Being this out of practice, I guess I couldn't expect to make it a no continue run. And alright, I have a default 5 lives again at the start of the round. Let's make it count. And a suplex for everyone, just because I really didn't want to continue that. In terms of how continues work in this game, they tend to, if you need to use a continue, they'll reboot you to the start of the area that you happen to. Are you serious? That's the life I needed. But back then, not now. Bugger. Alright, getting back to what I was saying. For the continues, when you need to use them up, it'll reboot you back to the area that you were in at the time. So, in this case, since I hadn't fully completed the first part of this stage, it put me right back to the beginning of the stage as a whole. Round in this case. But if I had progressed further in the stage, then it would have let me start at the beginning of that next aspect rather than rebooting me to the very start of the stage. Which, from what I recall off the top of my head, is an improvement from the first title, which even if you manage to progress to later parts of the stage, if you use a continue, they would actually put you back at the beginning of the round. At least I know for a fact that's how it was on the Final Fight Super Nintendo ports off the top of my head. I really could use that one life back then. In terms of how the difficulty spikes games goes on, the last stage was a jump of difficulty compared to everything before it, and this one, another big jump, I'd say, just because the sheer amount of enemies that they want you to wade through before you can get to the boss fight. Which I'd have to say, the actual route to the boss is honestly harder than the boss in this game. The actual boss itself is maybe like, I'd say, realistically 2 to 3 attacks for the most part. It's the same as general standard jump that everyone, or not standard punch that everyone seems to have, which you can usually break out of fairly easy. It does quite a bit of damage, but still, it's not a huge threat. And of course, some kind of an attack that's a knockdown attack, which can be done either kind of as a dashing attack in this case, or as well as a jumping attack that can move a slight bit at an angle. Admittedly, it's kind of standard for most bosses in this game have something like that, whether it being a jumping kick, a butt stomp, or something similar. So, just in sheer difficulty, the final boss of this game is easier than Belger from the first game. Because it's literally just the simplistic pattern that's used for basically every other boss in this game, as opposed to Belger, which you have trouble grabbing for the most part. He can break out of grabs fairly easy. in the very first bit, you have to really grab him in order to remove Jessica as a hostage, in order to get that part of the next part of the fight really starting. And off the top of my head, I don't think the final boss in this game has anything in terms of assistance or general thugs that'll appear during that boss fight, so there's no interference even. And of course, no projectiles either. So the boss in this game really is that much easier than Belger from Final Fight 1. In terms of how I feel this run is going so far, honestly, it does suck that I did have to use a continue there, but considering that I had not played this game in, I'd have to say probably a year plus. The fact that it still took to the last stage before I really had to use even one continue, it's not that bad. Although I wish I could say I would have been able to do that on at least a hard or expert difficulty rather than normal, but I guess that's what happens when you're out of practice. If anything, I'd actually be playing a little more of Final Fight 3 as of late, which part of the reason that is I was able to track down a working copy of the North American cart at last, just to complete my Final Fight set for the Super Nintendo. Well, I should say my Final Fight set consisting of the regular 3 titles, at least the representative of each. I don't have Final Fight Guy in this case, because for those that are unaware, I believe, at least off the top of my head, my understanding is Final Fight Guy appeared as not a proper release, but as a Blockbuster exclusive at the time when it was available. So unless you happen to somehow get a copy through other means, or probably picked up a used rental, much like Haggar the final encounter, you probably didn't get a hold of that game as easy. Which honestly, I can't say you're honestly missing much, because it's effectively the same game as the original Final Fight port, only instead of having Cody as one of the 2 playable characters, you trade Cody for Guy. That's the only real difference there. Oh, that and of course the intro and ending outro bit. If you play on hard difficulty to see the full ending, it does change in order to explain why or what happens when you leave or beat the game with Cody, or with Cody. Well, why do I keep saying Cody? With Guy only being present rather than just Cody being present. And of course, this is all a gamed version of the original arcade game, where it has everyone present. Getting back to the actual action here, we now have Grandfather and Dory here, and I believe this is the last, give or take the last section before we head to the next part of the stage. Should be stepping into the building any moment now, with an extremely tiny hop to get in. Haggar can't open a door like a normal person, because why not? And you can drop kick, of course. And yes, this is an entirely appropriate soundtrack pick for this section. Except not really. Mostly at this point of the game, what they really are trying to do is, yeah, we're just going to have you do kind of a endurance setup, and we're going to set a bunch of the same type of enemy at you all at once. And it's not like just 2, 3, it's like you're realistically facing 4, 5, maybe 6 of a specific enemy type here. And after you beat them, then they'll start cycling in the next ones, which I'm guessing is the Atlas set. For the Alias set, honestly, aside from the fact they're really fast, which makes it a little harder to hit with Haggar, they're not that hard. Their average attack is really useless. The Atlas set, which is now coming on screen really, they can hit you for quite a bit, and their grab attacks do hurt a lot if they manage to grab you, but they're actually slower than Haggar is, and smaller than Haggar is, and realistically weaker than Haggar is. So aside from the fact they can block and just basically save themselves for a moment, they're not really anything to be afraid of. They only get troublesome when you're kind of surrounded by a few enemies and they manage to creep up and grab you. That's the only reason to be concerned for them. I'm a mistake, they don't have a punch, it's it's kind of a palm strike. But generally, yeah, they're not a real threat. If anything, you can kind of abuse the fact that they block in order to kind of just creep in a few pixels closer to make it so you can properly combo them. And of course, at the end of your combo, especially as Haggar, it'll always knock down and break their guard anyway. The only thing is, in this case, when you have the situation where you're trying to punch them and they're off-screen like this, it does make it harder because they will block off-screen on occasion, meaning in order to reach them, you need to do something like a jump kick. Yeah, I could tell you it was right in front of me, but it was still whiffing. And if he manages to creep on even so much as a few pixels on his hand, he'll be able to do a palm strike against you, which is kind of annoying. Because this is a cheap hit that you don't really see coming. Alright, here's the aforementioned Scott enemy. I'd say they were throwing a Scott set, except they don't really have one. So it's just more generic throws as a whole, since aside from graphics, they're basically the same thing. They'll have a kind of a small punching combo, usually 2 to 3 hits. I've seen them occasionally do an anti-air attack, but it doesn't come up very often. It'll be kind of that lame uppercut motion. But now we bring in an lick, and it's like, okay, things suddenly become a little more troublesome and problematic. Just because they don't take that long to get charged. And this is unfortunately, I can't say the elect set because it's only the one type of enemy. Unlike the original Bill Bull set or G Orbiter, I believe the other type was Wong Wu, basically all of your fat dashing enemies from the first game. We don't have that kind of variety here, it's just this guy, who needs to work out quite a bit. If you manage to kind of keep them cornered off screen, or actually in hindsight, I think I might have actually wanted to keep them on screen just to make it easier to hit them and not get counterattacked. They're nothing to be afraid of. Alright, we have now the Robert set, which is the male replacement for the original Eliza set. Unfortunately, in this case, faster than Haggar. They have that annoying jumping attack, which makes it harder to hit just because of it. It's a really weird angle. You have to basically meet them in midair or be able to move out of the way so that when they do land, you punish them for it. Oh, as far as they only threw one there. But basically, if it wasn't for that jump attack, they wouldn't be a thing at all for Haggar. But because of that one thing alone, they get annoying. This must be the end of this particular room because that invisible wall there is a staircase, so a little more survival and then we can go on. Admittedly, I'm a little embarrassed that to get to this section I've gone through as many lives as I have. This is still a bit of an endurance match here just because of all the enemies they want to throw at you, but still, yeah, no, I shouldn't have been hit so many times on the way over here. I really should maybe I'll want to see after I'm done this kind of a video annotation here, or the voiceover bit here, I might want to go back and just count how many times I got hit by Elix as the course went on here, because I imagine it would be an absurd amount. This would be the third room of the overall last match, or last round here. Once again, it's a bit more of an endurance match where you're just facing off effectively every type of minor enemy that the game has thrown at you at this point. Thankfully, you don't have any bosses that'll be showing up at this point as kind of elevated mooks of any sort, which is much appreciated. But on the other hand, I know for a fact you'll be seeing a number of Andoras popping up through this section too. They'll be throwing effectively the Andora family at you. And of course you have this carryover from the first Final Fight game, where they're not hard, you're gonna hit by their flame if anything. And that was embarrassing. That is also embarrassing. Alright, let's keep... That's stupid Eliza filling off screen and do the same for Lick. Well, like I just said a moment ago, it might have been a little preferable to keep them on screen just to make it easier to hit. Crap, I really could have used some health there just to keep the health as high up as quickly or as much as possible. I think the elite attacks might actually do more damage than even the Endores at this point. Which, by the way, sucks. Okay, 2 Leon, so... that was well timed. I needed that. This time the game wanted to cooperate and give me at least an extra life so I have one more chance. Which is good because I needed it there. Just from the daring look at the background, I'm playing by memory here. I know I'm very close to the boss room at this point. So now it's just a matter of staying alive and... in theory, if I haven't forgotten everything about the boss, should be able to take care of it. Really, the only thing stopping me from getting that boss is... mistiming these Endores here, and random elect to ruin my day here. In theory, I would begin at the... oh, come on, I didn't even see him coming there. Anyway, hypothetically, if I had to use another continue, it would pop me at the beginning of this room, I think. But with how close I am to the boss door, I don't want to do that. That should have not hit me. He was already well behind me. Where'd that hitbox come from? Oh, well, nothing to do with that now. Hopefully, just in the next part of the room, there's a health pickup somewhere, because I could use it right about now. I forgot, yeah. Even if he's doing the dash attack, a lot of the times, unless the enemy has a specific anti-air, Jump Kink wins overall. Which is a really nice thing. And speaking of things that are carryover from the first game, you know it's probably a bit because of his previous wrestling background. Realistically, if you're doing a drop kick, especially with bow legs, you don't need to fist pump both your arms at the same time, Haggar. But it's a nice touch. I'll give you that much. Do I have some help here? Yes. Alright, I think that's literally now we're just at the boss door. It tells me to go forward, but there was nowhere to go to. Yeah, that's weird. Alright, 2 Endores, 1 Atlas. If they're kept off screen fully, no one can hurt me. And that is good. That, not so good. That is even less good. For safety's sake, might be safe to actually let them on screen and I can take care of it a little more cleanly that way. That was an accidental use of the special there. Alright, let the Atlas on screen. The Atlas on his own is relatively harmless. Only really hurts when you have more than one of them hanging around or in combination with other enemies, but a single one? Yeah, that's easy enough to dispatch. Alright, Haggar, time for this slow, methodical walk into victory. Did he just basically punch through? Yeah, that was a fake door. Okay, that makes sense. And now meet Retu, the final boss of the game, who... yeah. I didn't want to spoil the surprise fully, but honestly, Retu is a slightly retooled version of 1-1. The first boss of the game. Seriously, if you go back and look at 1-1's general shape and how he moved around, which is by small hops, and compare it to this guy, there's, other than the fact that it's maybe slightly taller and has a hurricane kick, which he stole from certain Shotokan characters that will remain nameless, yeah, he's got nothing to him. It's 1-1 all over again. If anything, maybe the hurricane kick has slightly better range, if anything. That was poorly timed. And oh crap, that was my last life. Well, here's the continued thing I was mentioning in action here. This is part of the reason why the game is that much easier than the previous one. They let me continue in the boss room. And admittedly, after looking again, Redu doesn't even hit as hard as I thought. It's just, unfortunately, it comes up pretty quickly, and they gave him a lot of health. The only other thing is, he is a bit hard to grab. He can escape your grabs at times. But especially compared to like a Rolando from just the stage prior, Redu isn't that hard. Not at all. Which I say just before I die in a silly way. I'd still say basically, if you can manage to get through the rest of the stage in order to get to Redu, this is still the easiest part of the stage, believe it or not. Although you see me playing kind of badly right now. If you manage to get some grabs in, then it's even that much easier. The only thing that presents a real challenge is the fact you can't grab him too easy, and they just gave him a lot of health. That's the only thing they made for artificial difficulty for this boss. Compared to Belgrade, this guy is basically a cakewalk, and for Final Fight 3, I recall Black, the Skull Gang, or Skullcross Gang's leader, being much more difficult in comparison as well. Although, I haven't necessarily done as much practice against Black off the top of my head. It's usually kind of an easy kill affair on his case. But yeah, no, why is this guy the leader of the new Mad Gear Gang again? I don't even know. Aside from the fact that clearly they're dealing with more drugs now in more obvious fashion, I don't know what this version of Mad Gear is even doing, really. Sodom/Katana's attempts to revive the gang and other things in the Street Fighter Alpha series makes a little more sense, or at least there seems to be more to it. And of course, from that same series, you have Rolando trying to basically give up the whole gang idea and start trying to build up forces. Nice finish. Did it just give me a life there? I'll have to check that in the replay in a second. 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, actually, yes, I did get a 1-up after all that. A really weird and pointless time to have it, but okay, sure, why not? There we go. Well, that's Final Fight 2 wrapped up in a nutshell on... like I said earlier, this was played on the default difficulty, which is the normal one, with all the default settings, meaning I didn't give myself any extra lives to work with. We worked on normal settings, and I did not activate the extra joy option, which is basically a shortcut key for the desperation attack, which in Haggar's case is the double lariat. So basically this was the vanilla of the vanilla run. Unfortunately, because it was on normal setting, we didn't see the full ending of that, which the ending will bring up. Because unfortunately, we need to beat these games on the hardest difficulty to see the quote-unquote full endings, although most of the time they don't add much, I'm going to be honest. And this is all for this particular game. I'm going to try a bit more experimentation to see the difference between Final Fight 1 and Final Fight Guy for the next eventual thing, and we're going to finish off with Final Fight 3, so at least we're ending on the last of the trilogy set, although I might decide to throw in a Mighty Final Fight at some point as well. Anywho, that's all for this particular video, as this Has actually been kind of a long adventure here, so to speak. Thank you all for watching this episode of Retro Ninja Gaming. I'll be seeing you next time, hopefully a little sooner than the last videos to come out. Take care and catch you all later.